Hello everybody, my name is Gorg from Bozo, and today we're going to attempt to beat Halo Wars 2 hardest achievement, You Got a Case of the Burglaries. Now originally this was going to be closer to a gameplay video similar to my Fortnite Power Armor video, but unfortunately when recording the gameplay, I forgot to change over my input device, so I ended up not recording any of my voice. So to salvage this embarrassing mistake, I had taken the liberty to turn this video into a how-to video. Now, You Got a Case of the Burglaries is an achievement on Halo Wars 2 which goes for a 20 gamer score. And to my knowledge, from what I've seen, this is an achievement that for the longest time I've avoided, as I thought it would be pretty difficult, at least harder than most other achievements in the game. And so I decided to finally go head on and tackle it. What You Got a Case of the Burglaries requires you to do is in a 1v1 skirmish versus a legendary AI, you must in the first 5 minutes of the match recycle your base and still win. Now recycling your base not only destroys it, sending you back in time-wise in gaining resources and troops, but also makes it so your base is knocked down to its basic tier, costing you even more resources to get your main base started. While all of this is happening, the enemy is just on the other side of the map, developing a large force heading right your way. Now during this, I had a few strategies in mind on how I might get this done, but to start things off, as it's been a while since I've played, to refresh my Halo Wars knowledge, I chose Sergeant Forge. Loading in the game, it does offer you the first 5 minutes of the match to at least try to gather some resources or troops, so I decided to deploy a few units of Marines before I jumped the gun on my base. Now unfortunately, when you destroy your base, you are given about 200 supplies so that you can hopefully make something out of your base, because if you destroy your base and don't have the necessary resources, well then things get pretty awkward. And at the start of my game, I like to make a mini army of 5 to 6 Marines in order to deal with sentinels around the power nodes. After getting my little army together, it is time to pull the trigger on my base. After destroying your base, the game gives you 60 seconds to make another base before you lose the game. Luckily, I was smart enough to gain more resources after spending them all on Marines. Once my base is built, I immediately built supply pads, and for this run, I plan to try to tank rush the enemy base, as a army of Scorpions are almost impossible to push back. Unfortunately, in a sick, twisted set of events, as my Marines march to another power node, the enemies attack me with air vehicles 5 minutes into the match. While this isn't a crazy feat, I was hoping the AI was a little more stupid and wouldn't have the balls to do such a horrible thing, but now my hopes were feeling a little rough. Back at my base, I'm able to load up every plot with supply pads and generators and hope to hoard resources as soon as possible. My plan is to upgrade my base to level 2, which doing so allows me to finally unlock the garage, which will allow me to produce vehicles, and without waiting long, I do just that. When upgrading your base to level 2, you also get 2 more building slots for you to build on, but as I took this win in the battlefield, I took a different right on my doorstep next to my power node, my Marines are immediately raided by the enemy's air force, leaving me with only 2 Marines left and still no troops. But once I built my garage, I can finally deploy vehicles when I have a horrible realization. Since I'm playing Sergeant Forge, he doesn't have Scorpions. Instead, he has Grizzlies, which, although way stronger, can't be produced till you have a command center level 3, which is another 1,000 power away. So leaving me with my plan in shambles, I try to build another base in order to create more supply pads and generators. I also decided in my loss of time to start building Kodiaks for base defense, while I build my force, which are basically artillery vehicles. On the other side of the map, I send out a scout to see what the enemies are up to, but that's short-lived as he gets bombed. As things are going semi-well, the enemies with even more Hornets start raiding my freshly new base, and so with my second base being violated by air vehicles, I decided to start deploying an ungodly amount of Wolverines, which are anti-air vehicles, and also build turrets around my base, upgrading them with anti-aircraft missiles as well. I wasn't going to give up this easily. Doing all this came at a cost though. I was producing so many units with resources and supplies I didn't have, so I wasn't able to upgrade my base, meaning I had 0 Grizzlies, meaning my plan sucks! I tried to build a base on the left side of the map instead after the right side's destruction, but of course that also goes to hell in less than 5 seconds. When I struggled to get a foothold on making troops, I decided to keep attempting to build secondary bases until eventually I reached 1500 power, which allows me to upgrade my main base to level 3. Of course, the enemy's air force automatically smells the presence of my second base for the 3rd time and violates it once again. And I decided to try and swat them off with a leader ability, but I might as well have thrown rocks at them. And finally, with my base at level 3, I can deploy Grizzlies, and finally my plan is getting closer to reality when all of a sudden the sky roars and my base is invaded by Pelican gunships.
I'm under fire from enemy vehicles!
Need something done fast, Chief?
Our
The enemy decided I was enough to invade, and so they did. What felt like the 30 Years' War evolved around my base, and as all I could do was slowly deploy grizzlies and fight the remaining forces. But to my demise, they quickly wrapped around the back and destroyed my garages. So I took the Brazeman route and rage quit. So with Sergeant Forge not being the move, I moved on to plan 2, using Kasano and Flamer rushing the enemy base, if the rushing part ever becomes real. Strategy number 2 is to instantly build an armory and get my hero out as I deploy Kasano herself. Fortunately, my dumbass thought she rides on a Flame Hog. This is not the case. She rides on a Cyclops, which while not bad, isn't as cool as I thought, so I was slightly demotivated. But to no avail, I still push on. After deploying Kasano, I destroy my base, but this time I didn't save supplies, so I started to panic as I couldn't afford to build a base. So I instantly saw myself back to the menu. This time, I learned the importance of destroying your base as the first step of the game instead of doing it later, as if you get it out of the way, you don't have to worry about it later. At this point, I decided to start capturing power nodes again, when barely even owning my first one, a enemy unit immediately rushes it. I have no idea if this is comedy or not, but I certainly have no idea if it's a psychological torture or not. While still going for the plan to use my leader off the bat, I decided to also test how powerful Kasano is against enemy bases. While going to destroy this base, the enemies used 2 engineers to repair it as I did damage, basically caused me to do absolutely nothing and look stupid. And to add insult to injury, as this went on, I immediately got jumped by 8 choppers. The enemies are using their scout vehicle in high amounts, which is a common strategy used by AIs, but is so effective for the Covenant as the chopper is significantly way more stronger than anything I could build in a large amount with nothing. Basically, it's a giant you move from the developers of this game. At least this time I was able to build a second base, which I used to build a barracks so I could start building my flame troopers out. Now I decided to use Hellbringers as my first wave of troops, which once deployed an army of 10 of them, with Kasano I decided to finally rush the enemy base, which went like this. Unfortunately, I forgot that I was fighting the Covenant, and got instantly glass beamed and lost a lot of my army. Luckily, since Hellbringers cost nothing, I was able to push them out at a high rate, instantly creating a second force. But unfortunately, this act of aggression would not go undone, as my main base got immediately attacked while I was defenseless. It wasn't long before my turrets pushed them back, but I would realize not long after why it wasn't so bad. With my second wave of Helljumpers, I decided to take initiative and attack an enemy mini-base deeper in the map in order to develop a foothold closer to the enemy's base. But the wrath of God overcame me, as the 8 Helljumpers I had were rushed by every single godforsaken vehicle in the game. I instantly saw the hopeless message of "you had no units," and so for my third date of losing horribly, I decided to finally kiss the resign button, as I was in love. But you know what they say, 4th time's a charm, so I loaded up Kasano in order to try and flesh out my plan a little better. This time, I'm not playing around. I use my base to deploy a mini army of troops, instantly rush the power nodes, then destroy my base. This time, Kasano, she's not seeing the ground at all, and I build my barracks firsthand so I could deploy flame troopers as soon as possible. As my troops are gaining supplies, a pack of jump brutes land on my soldiers and daze them, not only confusing me as I can't tell what they are for a moment, but also scared me as I thought I was cooked here. Once again, the enemies decided to rush my power nodes, but I didn't mind as I already had my flame troops out, so I had a little bit more confidence. Also this time, I thought it would be smart to instantly rush the other side of the map to build a mini base. My plan was to not have my base get caught by the enemies, and to have more plot to develop more generators, as I needed power to make flamers. And after completing my Grandmaster army, I rushed the enemy's base. I awkwardly passed by their entire force sitting there patiently, and to make things worse, my biggest weakness lied ahead of me. Shield generators, which protects the Covenant's base for a small amount of time from taking damage. This bought the enemies enough time to kill off most of my Hellbringers. I even attempted to call in Hellbringers and fire Warhogs from the sky. They didn't last very long either. So knowing that my troops weren't enough, I decided to attempt to build another base in order to get enough power to upgrade my main base, as I was still in level 1. Hoping to build a garage and spawn warthogs. Now something that's really cool about Kasano is instead of spawning normal warthogs, she has flame hogs, which if I could mass produce would be faster and stronger flame troopers, which do excellent damage to bases, sounding almost perfect. After building the garages, I sent out my second wave of flame troops towards the enemy's base, and before even making it, they are instantly glass beamed and half my force is dead. The shield is still an issue, but I called on some flame hogs and flame troops from the sky, and to my surprise, I was able to actually take out the enemy's base, or at least one of them. Yep, they still had another base at this time. And while I sat in peace and I built up my flame hog army, the enemy eventually pushed in my base, glass beamed my base for the 3rd fucking time, and made light work of my base as the fabled no troops remaining symbol lit up, so I made light work of the resign button, and rage quit for that session. But I wasn't done yet. You see, remember back when I was complaining about how the AI for the Covenant liked to spawn a bunch of hard-hitting choppers because they can deploy in high numbers cheaper and faster than any UNSC unit can? Well, because of this, as I was complaining about during the moment it was happening, I had an idea come to mind. Maybe playing as UNSC was my downfall all along. So I decided to switch over to my Covenant side for my third plan. But who exactly was I gonna play? And as I sorted through the different leaders, it all became very obvious. For those of you who don't know, there's a very old but powerful tactic used by many of those back in the Halo Wars 2 days that bring many players like myself post-traumatic stress just because we even think about it. Think of it almost as a forbidden jutsu, or a forbidden lightsaber move, but the very move I speak about is the Colony Rush. What the Colony Rush entails is that if you start as the Covenant leader Colony, who basically is a cracked out hunter, where usually you'll find flame troopers for the UNSC, is where you'll find these beasts of units called Goliaths. On top of that, they don't cost much at all to deploy, and they are very strong base destroyers. But it isn't just these units alone that make them strong. No, it's a special unit inside of the main base that you can deploy called a skitterer, which allows you to attach 2 of them to one unit as you please, while also taking up a unit out of your total amount deployable. Attaching skitterers to units gives them both damage and health boosts, and also acts as laser drones that can fire at anything around them from a distance, which turns a melee unit into a ranged unit for barely any cost. So now imagine this absolute sheer amount of power at the tips of your fingers, and with a whole army of them. Once you see this army coming here for your base, there's only so much you can really do to stop them. So in my 5th game of Halo Wars, I instantly destroy my base, rebuild it. I also decided to invest in mini bases as soon as possible so I can have extra spots for Harvester right off the bat. And as soon as my base is back up and built, I build a raid camp and start deploying my master army. And as I deploy Goliaths, I deploy skitterers and start to attach them to my units. This time, I also make more of an effort to get any small troops around the map so I could get my hands on resources and also as many mini base spots as I can. This time I was actually able to build a second base again, but the enemy had locusts who immediately sniffed it out and destroyed it, but it was too late for them. 12.5 minutes into the game, I sent my massive army towards their main base, and so the destruction began. Apparently the enemy has only had one base to my surprise, and so without much time passing, that sweet victory flashed on my screen, and without a doubt, the achievement popped. After 5 tries, I was able to finally beat Halo Wars 2 hardest achievement and come out victorious. And so with all being said, if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. I am Gorg from Bozo, and you all have yourself a wonderful day.